All right, everyone. Jeremy Knopf here with another episode of the Public Relations Declassified Livestream. We're going to go ahead and jump into the first segment here. And we're going to be talking about Simone Biles, who had a bit of a PR crisis this weekend. And it spanned the gamut from Olympic gymnast to mental gymnast. So one of the things I want to touch on before we get into what went down, what she did wrong, and how to avoid this situation in your own PR situations is you don't have to have an opinion about everything. All right. This is something that I see a lot of people on the internet feeling the need to do. They feel like they have to opine on every single topic that comes across their feed. And that's just not the case. We need to be talking about the things that are relevant to our brand. This doesn't mean just talk about your company. This means talk about the things that are relevant and connected to what it is that you're doing. So for a little bit of backstory, there was some back and forth on X over the weekend where Riley Gaines, who is a former athlete, she was a swimmer, and she had commented about some trans person in a school sports program and ended up resulting in a team being beaten dramatically in a very unfair competition. So Simone Biles decided to chime in on that, called her everything under the sun, made all kinds of statements about her and her character and this, that, and the other. And she pretty quickly realized that this is not 2020 anymore. This, woke mind virus, cancel culture bullshit does not fly anymore. So, she attacked Riley Gaines for her calling out the trans athlete in a women's sports, or in a girls' sports team, rather. And the replies on X were overwhelmingly critical of Biles. She was getting absolutely dragged in the replies and in the retweets. And users on TikTok shared the same sentiment. There was countless videos about her position and how wrong she was, and basically, that she was not acting as a role model to young girls. And as the pressure grew, as more people criticized her for her position, attacked her for, what she was claiming, she then tried to play it off as, oh, well, I don't really care. I don't care at all. And put out a series of videos talking about how much she didn't care. Let me tell you something. There is nobody who cares more than the person who spends a lot of time trying to convince you that they don't care. So on a side note on this aspect of it, if you ever find yourself in a situation where you are being attacked, whether it is right or wrong, don't waste your time putting out a statement that you don't care. Because if you're going to take the time to do that, then clearly you do care. And it just makes you look silly. It makes you look emotional, and it makes you look stupid. Now, as things went on, she figured that it was all going to blow over. People were just going to agree with her eventually. And like I said before, this isn't 2020 anymore. This shit doesn't fly. So eventually she ended up having to give a half-assed apology. I'll drop some screenshots into the Facebook group a little bit later. In fact, Chrissy, why don't you go ahead and take these two screenshots that I've already shared and drop them in the comments on the Facebook video here. But in the meantime, essentially her apology said nothing. It was just a lot of political doublespeak, not really taking any position one way or the other, not really a real apology. And as this all unfolded, and it got worse once she issued her fake apology, because frankly, it was not an apology. And this is one of the things I talk about a lot when we talk about PR crises. If you're going to apologize, and if you've done something wrong, you absolutely should apologize. But if you're going to apologize, it has to be an actual apology, not some "I'm sorry if anybody got offended" bullshit. You have to actually take accountability. But as this unfolded, the general consensus was that she destroyed her brand and people no longer see her as a role model to young girls. all for nothing, right? There was no value in her even commenting on this. There was no value in her, sharing her opinion. It served no real purpose. And all that it did in the end was destroy her brand. So what is the right approach in a situation like this? Well, the first thing is don't feel the need to have an opinion on everything, right? You're an expert at whatever it is that you're an expert at. You're not an expert on everything, and you don't need to have an opinion on everything. And you may have an opinion, but you don't have to necessarily share it. So just focus on what aligns with your brand. So, in her case, she could talk about all kinds of sports related things. This, technically, it's somewhat sports related, but it's really more of a political issue. So it was a bad move all the way around. So, let's say, for example, that you're in real estate. Obviously, a topic like this would not be something worth commenting on. There's no real value in that. But an issue that's not directly real estate related that might be worth opining on is, let's say there's something about the issue of veteran homelessness. If you're a real estate investor or a real estate agent, you may know of resources. You may know of problems in the system. You may know of specific statistics. Those could be valuable things to comment on, even though it's not directly related to your brand, but it is related to what you do, because you do provide housing for people in various ways. So we want to be very careful that whatever we say does align with our brand in some meaningful way. Now, when you find yourself in a hole, you've made some kind of misstep, people are pissed off at you, you're getting dragged online, maybe even getting negative reviews, people are spreading the word about you. You're in that hole. Now is the time to stop digging. Don't double down on the stupid shit that got you there in the first place. Don't put out a bunch of videos talking about how much you don't care, because it shows that you do. Stop doing the things that got you there and get back to focusing on what you need to focus on. And if you are in the wrong, then apologize quickly and take full accountability. It can't be this, let's try to straddle the line. Let's try to, make a statement, but not actually apologize, not actually admit any wrongdoing. That doesn't work. That just gets the people who are already pissed off more pissed off, and it makes you look less credible, and it makes people question your integrity. So that's what you need to do. Stay out of all the topics that don't relate to you. And when you do fuck up, own it, fix it, and move forward. All right, so next up, we're going to talk about how to write an attention-grabbing pitch that gets you featured. Now, this is critical because when you pitch a journalist, you only have so much time to grab their attention. They get so many emails every single day. And if you don't grab their attention, they're going to shit can that email. They're going to move on to the next one. So there's a few different ways that I like to grab attention. One of them is something called a startling statistic. So one statistic that I always have on the top of my head is one on veteran suicide, right? Most people don't know this, but 22 veterans a day commit suicide. So what you have to do is find a statistic that's relevant to your industry and relevant to the story that you're pitching, and use that to grab somebody's attention, because that data gets people interested and engaged, and it gets them to read further into your pitch. Another approach is to use a powerful story. So in my case, I've got my health crisis that I've talked about frequently, where I was blindsided by a health crisis that almost killed me. I spent 2 years on my deathbed. Business pretty much withered away to nothing. And then I rebuilt everything from there, bigger and better than ever before. So leveraging a story like that is a great way to get somebody's attention. And then that gets them further into the pitch. And one more approach that you can use is a significant development. So let's say you're in the medical field and you figured out how to cure cancer. That's a pretty big development. That's something that affects a lot of people in a very meaningful way. Or maybe you did something else. Maybe you built a tiny homes community for helping veterans who were homeless kind of get their first step at having their own place to kind of work their way back into society properly. That's big. Writing a book is another good one. Maybe you've launched a big podcast, or you have some big names involved with that podcast. Those are things that can be very significant. And because there's something significant to it, that gets people's attention. People love a sensational story. So these are a few ways that you can do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run through a few different, I basically wrote up a little pitch here. Not sure if Deb is on with us today, but I basically wrote this around her as kind of a framework using some of the things that we've just talked about here today. So what you're going to do is you're going to open with a short and engaging sentence. I usually like for this to be literally one sentence, nothing more. Now, in this case, we're going to open up with a startling statistic, and that is home sellers are shocked to learn that today over 14% of pending sales fall through before closing, and that's the highest that it's been since 2017. That's the kind of thing that most people don't realize, and that's the kind of thing that if you're a homeowner and you're trying to sell your home, that's a pretty scary number, because it means it's probably going to be pretty damn hard to sell your home, or at least sell it for the price that you're looking for, right? So we open up with this, and that immediately shows the journalist, hey, this is something that my audience is going to be very interested in. They're going to want to read it. They're probably going to want to share and talk about it with others. So this is a great opening line here. Opens up with a statistic, and it's very powerful. It's very emotional, and it grabs people's attention. So from here, we're going to open up into, we're going to follow up with some supporting information. So in this case, we're going to talk about where that data came from. So we then go into a recent Redfin study reports that throughout 2025, more real estate transactions failed to make it to closing than at any other time in the last 8 years. They cite higher interest rates, rising costs, and plummeting consumer confidence as the primary causes. So that now shows exactly why this statistic exists. You know, what is the driving cause behind this? And that gives a little bit more context to the story. It shows why this matters. It shows how it's going to impact people in a brief sense. Now, we're going to get a little bit more into the impact, where we tell the impact story. So next up, and by the way, as we're going through each of these is basically set up as one paragraph. So that first one sentence is just, that's a paragraph. Then the next section, this section is, in this case, it's 2 sentences, but I've got that set up as one paragraph. The next paragraph, also going to be short. It's just one sentence here as well. Now we're telling the impact of this. What does this mean to people? What does this do? And in this case, we're telling them this makes it harder to sell your home in today's market. So it's more important than ever to work with a realtor who understands how to price and position your home for a fast sale at the best price. Now, this is the kind of thing that a lot of agents, frankly, suck, right? So a lot of times what you'll find is inexperienced agents, because they want that listing so bad, they're going to list the home at whatever the seller thinks is fair. They're not going to push back on the seller. They're not going to say, hey, I know you want, $800,000 for your house, but in reality, it's only worth, $600,000. Because a lot of times homeowners, if you cannot convince them of that data, they're going to go with whoever tells them the highest price, because that's what they think they're going to get out of it. The problem is, if that's not the number that the market will support, they're never going to sell it for that price. So it doesn't matter. So this is why this is so important, because a good agent knows what a home is actually going to sell for, within a certain range, of course. But a good agent knows what it's going to sell for. They know where to price it, and they also know what to do to the home to get it to sell for a higher price. There may be some modifications that need to be made. Maybe you need to renovate the kitchen. Maybe you need to, do some landscaping. There's various things that could be done. And then there's also aspects of how the home is presented, right? How do they write that listing? Do they bring in a really good photographer to shoot great photos and really present the home as best as it can be presented? And that's the difference between a good agent and a bad agent. So in this case, we're showing where the value comes in. Then from here, we're going to explain your qualifications. So the next paragraph in this pitch, we write, Deb Berger is a real estate broker with a 3-decade career that spans several down markets in the real estate industry. And she knows what separates homes that sell from ones that don't in market conditions like we're facing today. So what we're doing here is we're telling this journalist a little bit more about Deb's background. We're showing that journalist how Deb's insight can help the journalist's audience sell their home at a better price, at a higher price. And that may mean pricing it more appropriately, a lower price, or that may mean making some renovations, making some improvements that will bring the price up. Obviously, it also could mean how it's presented. But by highlighting Deb's experience, and she's been through some down markets, and this is a really important detail here because, look, the real estate market has been booming for a really long time. It's been a constant upwards trajectory for quite some time. I'm not sure what the exact timeline is. I know it's been over a decade. So a lot of agents today, they don't have that background. They've been in a market where you show up, you list a property, and it sells, and it's fast and easy. And that's not really the case anymore. Things are slowing down a lot, and there's a lot more negotiation. It's really now more of a buyer's market than it is a seller's market. And that's where having an agent that really understands what they're talking about and really understands how to position and how to market a home becomes invaluable. And so by highlighting Deb's experience, by highlighting the fact that she's been in conditions like we're facing today, that gives the journalist a very clear picture as to why she is very qualified to be cited in an article or in a TV segment. So the last thing we're going to do is we're going to close with a call to action. Now, I like to keep these nice and simple, nice and short, and I don't like to be, I guess the word I would use is desperate. I see a lot of people, they really come off kind of needy and clingy when it comes to the call to action. And I really like to just keep it very emotionless. It just says, if she sounds like a fit for any stories you'd like to cover, let me know, and I'll make her available or get answers to any questions you have for her. So basically, that's positioning her as an in-demand expert, right? I'm not saying, hey, please let me know if you have anything that might be a fit, and I'll do anything to make this work, and blah, blah, blah. That's what I see a lot of people do. And it makes you seem too desperate. It makes it seem like you want this too much. Whereas if you're really the expert that you're presenting yourself as, you should have opportunities like this often. So if you get this one, great. If you don't, great, because there's going to be another one. So that's why I like to go into this with more of an insouciant tone, a tone where it's like, yeah, if this turns into something, great. And if not, that's fine too. And I find that a lot of times that is a very effective approach because you're demonstrating the demand for your expertise, right? You're showing people that you're not desperate for this. You're not clinging to it. So it does help a lot in getting this to turn into a media feature. Now, this is an approach we've used. This whole kind of framework that I just broke down for you is an approach we use all the time. In fact, it's one that we used for an article that we put Deb into at Newsmax not too long ago, where she had an opportunity to share her insight on the due diligence aspects of real estate and kind of how to look at a deal and make sure that it's really a good deal. Don't just look at the price, but look deeper into the numbers, look into what's going on in the local market, look into, broader real estate trends, like a lot of different aspects on the due diligence or the underwriting process. So this same approach was what landed her a feature in Newsmax, which is a tier 1 publication. Brings a lot of credibility to her because Newsmax isn't going to cover just anyone. They're only going to cite certain experts because they only have so much space. So if they're going to feature somebody, if they're going to put that person's opinions in their articles or in their TV programs, it's because that person is one of the best of the best. And so this is the same approach we've used here. It's the same approach we use day in and day out at Spartan Media, and it will work for you if you follow this same framework. So put this in place. Your pitches will get a hell of a lot more attention, and a lot more of them will turn into media features. Okay, so next up, we're going to talk about the hero's journey. This is basically a concept that will get the journalists excited about you and your story, and they'll want to feature you. So if you're not familiar with the hero's journey, basically, this is where you take your story and you leverage storytelling to get people engaged. Okay. Now, storytelling is how humans have passed down our history for pretty much all of recorded history. I mean, look all the way back to the cavemen, and they've got the cave paintings, and they're, painting stories of what's happening, and they would communicate, amongst themselves of things they've seen and heard and things they've experienced and things like that. But also, I mean, look throughout history, storytelling is, generally speaking, how most of human history has been passed down. And what that does is it creates a biochemical reaction in the brain that creates and increases trust. Now, this is hardwired into our brains. So this is not something that, like, if you start using storytelling, people are inherently going to trust you more. This is just the way that the human mind works. So absolutely leverage this because it's incredibly powerful. It also helps people to relate. So they need to know why to care, why they need to care before they actually will. Now, they don't care about you. They don't care about your industry. They don't care how your world works yet. Once you give them a reason to, they will. All right. And the other side of this is that it builds hope. So when you tell a story and they're going from this problem to this thing was solved and now everything's in a better place, that creates this inherent sense of hope. And when people feel hopeful, they feel optimistic, they're more inclined to take action, whether that be reaching out to you, buying your product or service, collaborating with you in some way, whatever that may be. That is going to be driven to a large degree by their hope, by their optimism. It also allows you to explain how things work without boring people, right? Because the thing is, they just want the results or the outcome. All right. There's an old saying, I think it came from David Ogilvy, one of the masters in the advertising world, where he talked about people don't want a drill. They want a hole. The drill just happens to be a way to get to that hole. So storytelling enables you to show people, it will keep them engaged while you're showing them how you're going to provide that result, that outcome. Now, in this storytelling, why you do what you do, honestly, is far more important than what you do. Now, there's a right way and a wrong way to tell the story. We've all seen these internet marketing douchebags. Everything is all about themselves and the money. They're sitting around on Lambos or boats or jets, and they're flashing money, and really everything is focused on their ego. And that, there was a period where that actually worked. Now, people cringe at that shit. Everybody hates that. It's not effective. It's just cringy as hell. So stay away from that. Instead, you want to market with authenticity. So some examples of people who are really good at this, Tony Robbins is one that I've always loved. He's got a great story. He's used that story. In fact, he's used numerous stories in everything he does. So he's a great example. In fact, if you go look through some of his videos, some of his old audio programs, I'm old enough that I remember having old cassette tapes, even before CDs were a thing, of his various audio programs where, they were like recordings of his stage presentations. And he really leans heavy into storytelling. Alex Hormozy is a great example as well. So if you look at, what is it? I think it's $100 million offers. And then I think he's got $100 million leads as well. And several of his books lean heavily into storytelling. So I would encourage you to check those out. You're going to see a lot of really good examples of storytelling done in a very effective way. Kim Kiyosaki is another one of my favorites. She is the co-founder of the Rich Dad Company. You guys are probably familiar with the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad. She's a great human, and she leverages storytelling in a lot of her stuff as well. So these are some examples of some people who are doing it really well that you can look at and model to kind of get your own story a little bit dialed in. So let's talk about how to come up with your origin story. So here's the thing. You're not going to come up with it. It already exists. You're not creating it. You're just distilling it. The thing is, you have to make it engaging and short enough that they don't get tired of hearing you talk and just tell you to shut the fuck up. So you already know how to do this. And I promise you that every single one of you has seen this hundreds and maybe thousands of times. If you want to take a guess where, it's Hollywood. Every single movie is essentially the hero's journey. So initially, every movie starts off like this. Everything is good or great, or it's perceived as such, or at least it's okay, right? There's not a huge problem yet. Then something happens to change that. Then the hero they come in, they try to solve the problem, but they're not quite ready. Maybe they're not smart enough. Maybe they're not strong enough. Maybe they don't have the right tools or resources or connections. Whatever it is, they aren't prepared to solve that problem. And then they kind of have to go off on this little side quest to find a way to change that, to get whatever's missing. And in that side quest, they face a whole bunch of other problems. They have to overcome numerous challenges. And along the way, they probably experience several losses. But in the process, they learn from this and they get better, faster, stronger. They get smarter. And a lot of times what you'll also see is that they help other people overcome their challenges in the process. Now they come back to the original problem. And now they've often got the help of some additional friends. Then they come in, they save the day, and everything ends up in a better place, and it's never going back to what it was. The problem's fixed, and everything's amazing, right? That's the journey of every big Hollywood movie. And so you want to take that same exact approach in your own story. So there's some questions you're going to ask yourself, and we're going to use these questions to extract your story, pull all the information together. And then from here, we then take this information and we distill it down into your hero's journey. So you can look at, you want to first look at, why you do what you do. You got into the business for a reason. You didn't just get into it because it seemed like fun or it seemed like a great way to make a shit ton of money. You got into it for a bigger reason. I guarantee you that every damn one of you has some meaningful reason that you got into what you're doing today. Now, we want to look at then, what were you doing before moving into this role? Maybe you had a shit job. Maybe you were broke. Maybe you were miserable. You hated what you were doing. Whatever it is, look at what you were doing before you got into what you're doing today. How was your life? How was your business or your job? What did your environment look like? What did your relationships look like? What were your problems that you were facing? From here, we then want to look into what problem led you to moving into this role. So for a lot of you, probably most of you, you're entrepreneurs. You're probably not working at a job somewhere. Most of you you already have a business of some sort. Maybe it's a little side business that you're just getting started. Maybe it's something that's been running for 20 years. But I would venture a guess that the vast majority of you, probably 95% of you listening to this right now, are already entrepreneurs in some way. And I would also venture a guess that most of you got into entrepreneurship because something happened, a problem occurred, a challenge arose, and you had to solve that. And that then led to you going into your business. So, in my case, I was already running a business when I had my health crisis, but this is a perfect example. So I had run my business, which was at the time, a full service digital marketing agency, from most of my civilian life, right? I got out of the Marine Corps, started my first business, which failed. Then a few years later, started my next agency, ran that successfully for many years. That's where my problem then popped up. I was blindsided by a health crisis that almost killed me. And I spent 2 years on my deathbed, business withered away to nothing, and burned through everything I had just trying to stay alive. And when it came time to get back into business, I leveraged public relations to put myself back on the map. Now, that health crisis I have used extensively when talking about my business and what I do and how I do it. So what happened was, when I had to get back into the world and I leveraged public relations to put myself back on the map, that blew up bigger and faster than anything had before. And that was when I pivoted to focusing entirely on public relations, because I saw how powerful it was. And so for me, that was my quote problem that led me to moving into this role. So all of you have a story like that. You've got some kind of problem that led you either to your original business or to a major pivot or to a specific product or service that you launched within your business. So identify what that is. All right. This is a key part of this hero's journey. And then you want to look at, what did you learn from that process? Now, in my case, I learned there's a lot of amazing people out there who are great at what they do. They provide tremendous value to their clients. They're really focused on delivering the maximum value. But because they're not these egotistical, overzealous promoters, they aren't as well known. Meanwhile, the other people who kind of suck, they don't give a shit about really giving value. They just want to get that check. They're out here promoting themselves like a champ. And people think they're awesome. People think they're huge. They're the most amazing thing in the world because they're very active in promoting themselves. So in seeing that, in seeing these disingenuous people crushing it and the real experts kind of being off on the sidelines a little bit, I learned that not everything was what it seemed. And that was when I wanted to start focusing on helping the people who are the legitimate experts to get out there, to reach a larger audience, to build more authority and trust so that they could serve more people in a more impactful way. And in the process, also kind of drown out some of these douchebags. Then what you want to do is unpack how you now serve people in this role. So in my case, when I do what I do in my PR firm, I help the people who are legitimate experts reach a larger audience, to build more authority, and to serve more clients. Now, obviously, they make more money in the process. But on top of that, by them being out here and serving more clients, it means fewer of these less effective people are out there in the market in as big of a way. So people in the industry as a whole get better service. So, in here, I talk about how we use that same process that I used for myself. Obviously, along the way, there have been some refinements to that process. But we talk about how I use that process to take these legitimate experts and turn them into a recognized authority in their industry. Now, you've got something like that you do. Whatever it is you do, whether you're a real estate investor, whether you're a coach of some sort, whether you're a founder of a SaaS company, whatever you do, you've got a certain process for serving people. And that process gives them a lot of value. It puts them in a better position. It gives them more opportunities. It is a powerful resource for them. So break that all down. Figure out what that is. And I will tell you, a lot of people in your situation find themselves not really having a good answer to this because they're so deep in the trenches, right? You're busy every day, all day, working at what you do. So a lot of times you don't even see what you do. And this is somewhat tangentially related to imposter syndrome, but I don't think it's quite a complete overlap. Basically, and I found this with myself, I will do something that I just think is normal, and I'll talk to a friend about it, and they're like, "Oh my God, that's amazing! Like, how did you do that? I can't even imagine how you would go through the process of making that happen." All of you have a situation like that. All of you have amazing things that you do that you just take for granted because you've got years, or in many cases, decades of knowledge that you have spent honing your skills and expertise. And so you're doing amazing things, but you don't even realize it because it's just normal business as usual to you. So what you might find is that for this aspect of your hero's journey, you're going to have to start talking to some of your clients. You're going to have to start talking to people outside of your industry. You're going to have to start talking to some of your friends who know you and they're smart and they're supportive and they see what you do, but they're not involved in the day-to-day business like you are. So they're going to see things that you won't see. And they're going to see how amazing you are, and they're going to see the impact that you have, whereas you may not see it because it's just what you just do all day, every day, right? So you want to look into, how you're really helping them and get some outside insight on that. And then you also want to unpack how you are uniquely qualified. So if we go back to my case, I'm uniquely qualified because I went through this process. I am the direct result of the outcome of the process that we now use for our clients. When I was on my deathbed for 2 years, I became a ghost. In the marketing world, if you're not constantly out there, constantly in front of people, constantly sharing your knowledge and promoting yourself, you might as well be some rando on Fiverr. And that's the point I had gotten to. And so by me starting over, I think I was, late 30s, early 40s. I forget exactly when it was. But I basically had to start over from zero. So in going through this, I now have experienced firsthand the impact that this creates. So that's how I'm uniquely qualified. And then beyond that, we've helped so many people go through this same exact process. We've taken people who are amazing at what they do. They bring tremendous value to their clients and they really care about them. It's not just money. They actually want them to be as successful as humanly possible. In taking those people and, they're out here operating in their little circle and they're quiet, they're under the radar, they're doing their thing. And we take them from there and we elevate them into a recognized authority where now the media is reaching out to them. Now they've got all kinds of opportunities coming to them. People want to partner with them. People want to collaborate with them. People want to do all kinds of things with them. So I went through it myself and I took many, many, many people through it as well. So that's what makes me uniquely qualified. All of you are in that same boat. You use what you do every day. So you know exactly how it works. You know exactly the impact it has. And you've served numerous people in that same way. So you've seen the outcome over and over and over. So this isn't a fluke. You have the skill set to continue delivering that result over and over. And then the last thing we want to look at is, what is your mission? In my case, my mission is to take people who are legitimate experts and get them featured in the media in a way that turns them into a recognized authority in their industry so that they can attract more opportunities and earn more money. All right. So now what you want to do is you want to take all of this information that we've now put together. And generally what I would suggest doing is dump it all into a Google Doc. Or if you're old school, sit down with a pad of paper and just write everything down. And then of course you'll still dump it into a Google Doc later. And then you'll start distilling it. And you want to get it down into a nice, probably less than 300 word chunk of text where you're basically telling this whole story in a very tight, distilled message that's going to be very engaging. It's going to be the kind of thing that people are going to listen to or they're going to read, and they're going to have a really clear understanding as to who you are. Not just, your name or your, maybe there's a designation in your industry or a job title or something like that. Way beyond that. They're going to understand who you are as a person. What drives you? What do you value? What do you really care about? And what are you trying to do for other people? Because at the end of the day, this is not about you. Think about it. What is a hero? A hero is somebody who saves other people, who protects other people, who serves other people. And so it's not really about you. It's about you in the sense that it's about what you are doing for other people. And when you tell your story from the perspective of that journey and how that is helping you to serve a particular group of people, that is a game changer, and it gets journalists excited. And beyond that, it gets your prospects excited. It gets potential partners and investors excited. It's just an absolute game changer. It builds and inspires trust, and it opens up so many doors for you. So I encourage all of you to go through that process, map out your hero's journey, and then distill that down into a nice, tight, what I call a core positioning statement, which is basically an encapsulation of who you are, what you do, who you do it for, and why you do it. And when you do that, it's going to open up so many doors for you guys. All right, so we're going to close up today's episode with my PR PSA. And today's PR PSA is, despite how social media may make it seem, you don't need to share your opinion on every single topic that comes across your feed. Now, this is a really easy one to stumble on because you're going to see things online that you feel like you should chime in on, especially if you're having a bad day. When you're emotionally charged, particularly negative, but sometimes also positive. It's really easy to jump in and chime in on everything. Most of the time, it's probably not worthwhile. Now, there are cases where it makes sense to chime in on things that maybe aren't as relevant to your brand as they should be. Sometimes that's an engagement strategy, but 99% of the time, you want to focus on the things that are relevant to your brand. So you need to know exactly what your brand stands for, exactly who your audience is, and for the most part, don't comment out of that sphere. Focus on what's relevant to your brand. You're going to see a lot more engagement. You're going to see a lot more positive engagement, and you're going to generally be a hell of a lot happier. Because if you're out here posting all kinds of, nonsensical political rants, generally speaking, you're going to attract a lot of haters and trolls, and that's going to detract from your real message. And beyond that, if you're posting a bunch of things that draw in the trolls and they're attacking you online, potential clients could see that, potential partners could see that, potential investors could see that, and they see all this negativity in the replies, and that could turn them off. So it's important to be careful. If you're going to comment on something, do so strategically. Don't just do it, on a whim because you were driven emotionally. All right, everyone. That is a wrap for today's episode of the Public Relations Declassified Livestream. Hope you guys found a ton of value in this. If you did, I would love it if you would share this with somebody who you think could get value from it. If you're not already in our Facebook group, go ahead and hit that QR code with your camera, and that will take you directly to our free Facebook group. And we also stream to YouTube, and all of our previous episodes are up there. So go ahead and head over there and hit that subscribe button. And in the meantime, I look forward to seeing you all in the next episode. Thanks, everyone.